Welcome everybody to Awake and Alive, our event, first event produced by the Knights of Camelot. We're sorry that we're running a little bit late, but we had some technical difficulties. We need to get our sound working and everything's working fine, so we hope that you'll enjoy our event. My name is Stephen Kelly, and my co-hosts that are putting this on is Jerry Avalos, Tommy Hansen, and we are also being assisted by Dee Marie Mulatiare. And we all will be speaking today. We have some excellent speakers. We also have Craig Kessinger, and he'll be our first speaker today. But before we get started, I'd just like to mention, first of all, the alignment. Did everybody enjoy the energy the other night? Everybody notice any changes? Things are a little bit different. So all the people that said nothing happened, I sure felt a little different. I got up in the morning and it was immediate. So I don't know if you guys noticed, but things are definitely changing, and I think the transition is definitely upon us. So before we get started, one thing I'd like to do real quick, if you guys will all help me, is we're going to do a little Reiki room clearing, a little cleansing of the room. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this little symbol right here. This is the Shaku Ray. Now what I want everybody to do, hold up their hand, take their finger, and draw this symbol. Start at the top and make a 7, and goes down, and then counterclockwise spiral into the center. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go each corner of the room, and we're going to say Shaku Ray, Shaku Ray, Shaku Ray, Shaku Ray. Okay? We do. This is the standard power symbol in Reiki, and this is the first thing we do when we're sending energy. And you can take this at home, and you can use it for cleansing your home. If your friend is not feeling good, Shaku Ray, Shaku Ray, Shaku Ray. So this is a great way of cleansing your home. We're gonna have more extensive descriptions of the various speakers, but I'm going to get right into Craig, because he's our first speaker up here. And I see Craig is getting psyched up over there. Craig is a researcher of the Native American Ute and Aztec history. He's a lecturer of metaphysics and esoteric sciences. And today he will examine the depths of Mesoamerican calendrics date systems and how they relate to humanity and the future of our ever-changing world. I hope that's a good enough description. Anyway, he's going to give us a PowerPoint presentation, and if you would all please welcome our first speaker, Mr. Craig Kessinger, everybody.
Alrighty, good afternoon. This has been quite a bit for us. And what I want to present to you has a lot to do with what we've been told, but also a lot to do with some actualities. And hopefully this isn't going to come as too much of a shock to some people. There are some differences between what we have with certain writers. There were a lot of American writers, even some French, Italian, German, that went down into the Mesoamerican area, and when they did, most of them brought a lot of money, clothing, building materials, a variety of other things into an indigenous area that was extremely depressed. Now, being native, but I've never been on reservation, I was adopted after I was 3 days old. So I do understand, though, the work that I've done with AIM when I was in Phoenix, and that went on for about 2 years before I retired myself from that. But natives have a tendency, regardless of where they are in the world, if you bring something into their area, they're ready to tell you anything you want to hear, as long as you keep bringing the gifts. So there was a series of researchers that went down there, particularly Jose Aguilares, and Major John Jenkins, who were one of the first two that were out there that started to present a lot of information. Their information that they presented was true right up to a certain point, and then it fell apart. It fell apart the minute they started talking disaster. Because anyone who has, and I've been doing this for 9 years, and I find that interesting that this is my 9th year. I am done. Okay? But I did this for the ARE, Edgar Cayce Foundation, for about 3 years, and I also did it for the Southwest Dowsing Community for a few years. So sharing this information today, I know we may have some time limitations, but I'm going to try to get through as much as I can. And the first thing I want to make note of is that the alignment was not yesterday. But I'll tell you something that's good about this. See, it doesn't matter because the overall width of this event is 24 years, down to 12, to 8, to a 4-year window. That 4-year window also happens to be the Venus transit. Now, we're going to go into, and I want to be able to explain to you here kind of as quickly as I can, bring you up to date a little bit on what it is the Mayans really did, because they had a priesthood that were called the Balaam. And when we talk about the 9 books of the Shalom Balaam, we're talking about this priesthood. And this priesthood was in a very provincial state. How many of you are familiar with the board game by Milton Bradley called Risk? You remember that? Risk was one of these games that essentially had to get the entire world on a board map, and you put little pieces on it, and you rolled the dice, and you took turns, and the object, of course, was global domination. No bloodshed. It was a game. The Mayans played it for real. Like the Egyptians, there was a series of different kings and pharaohs and lords and everything that they had into individual provincial states. And it was king of the hill as far as they were concerned, because this went down for hundreds and hundreds of years. The Mayan cosmology, as far as what the stone is not Mayan. It's Aztec. It's Aztec, and it's even older than that. It goes further than the Olmec. And so when a lot of this information began to come out and stuff like that, this is something that's very interesting to me about certain spiritual communities. We use a catchphrase, and heaven forbid you change that phrase. See, because that's going to freak out a lot of people. So anyway, and I'll make one note here, because I had a friend of mine later, not too long ago, call me a bling killer, fluff killer. I suppose I am. But what I'm going to try to do today is present you with something that I hope you will discover is far more real than what we are being told or being led to believe. So it doesn't matter if the actual alignment wasn't yesterday. The thing is, and I love this idea, because when I was on Facebook and talking to a bunch of people, the way that this went to, when everybody woke up this morning, did we all exhale? So this is good, because it put us on the same page, finally. So the mechanics of this are not quite as important as the mentality of it. Because for the Mayan, they had in their mind and in their world every reason to believe they would see this day. When Cortez showed up about 505 years ago, he was a little bit of a shock. See, because one of the first things that Montezuma and his crew did was go, he's early. And this is something that a lot of people don't realize in the history books, because this is why Montezuma and a handful of other provincial states opened their doors to him, because they believed he was Quetzalcoatl. And Quetzalcoatl, in the ever real sense, is astral, and a conscious level that has operated for thousands of years. Buddhas, Zoroaster, Christ. The consciousness is extremely similar. So, for the Mayan, zero evidence that the ancient Maya predicted the end of the world in 2012. This is coming from Major John Jenkins, which I am totally shocked by, because he's one of the original doomsdayers. And if you've been following this at all, you'll notice that a good deal of these researchers have changed their story as it's come around. Maybe it's because of information that they discovered or tried to employ, but it may also have to do with that the general conscious of the people are not all that accepting of there's a zero time, my watch is going to go click, and the world's going to go goodbye. That's pretty extreme to assume. And I loved it back in the day when George Carlin was around, because he made a statement one time. He says, we are fools to believe we can destroy the earth. It's been around for billions of years, coming together as it has. The solar system has balanced itself out. And all of this comes down to one particular point. This is, and you can see these things are a little beat up because I have taken them for 5 years. But this is kind of interesting. You can take a look at this later, and it basically breaks it down for where we are into our local group as a supercluster and where we are positioned in the Milky Way. One of the things that's kind of interesting about that I find is that the Mayan paid as much attention to it as they did with having priests on individual hills, and each one of those hills has a representation of a point in the sky. And as a priest, you are given one light, and you watch it all night. So I have a dozen priests on the hill. They're watching a dozen different objects. They're all making notes. They're building information. And part of that information that's unique is the fact that it had adjustments in it. This is their adjustments. It's called the Popol Vuh. It was written after the conquistadors wiped out a good portion of them. And like the Kabbalah, the priesthood that existed then in the Middle East world, the only reason why things like this get written down is because the oral traditions are about to die if the last person is killed with the story in their head. It had to be written down. The Crusaders were ready to wipe out as far as most of what was going on in the Kabbalic world. And so when the Zohar was written, it was compiled between a series of a whole bunch of scribes, a whole bunch of priests, rabbis, who definitely were very hesitant to put all their secrets down on paper. There are secrets to this that you can only find them if you are willing to go the distance to see them. So, out of all these other writers, and just a quick note, this was John Jenkins' book. I beat the crap out of this. I found about 1 out of 5 pages worth reading. But I chewed it apart for years when I first got into this, because I had a lot of people going, if you're Native American, what's that deal? What's going on with this? People don't know. Natives think a little differently, and we have our secrets. AIM didn't like me because they couldn't pinpoint me into anything in particular, and this is why I am glad that I came into this world with no tribal affiliation. I don't have to pay attention to any of them, and they didn't like that about me. The other guy is Jose Aguilares. Now, between these two, there was a really good amount of information. Because there's a clock. Our body is a clock. The air that we breathe has a certain energy in it that feeds that clock. That clock exudes through our entire body and exits at the head and in the palms, energetically. There's a lot of native ceremony and ritual that is deeply rooted into these parts of the body, the head, the crown, and the palms. Anyway, long story short, the Popol Vuh is essentially the Quiche Maya's Bible. And when this was assembled, it was only assembled with a portion of the information that was available. Many of the codices were burned. The Dresden Codex, thank God, has a lot of astronomical data in it. And that was one of the first things they went to when this whole thing came about, because somebody woke up one day in a museum and basically said, wait a minute, I think we found a bug. And that was exploited for years, and here we are. But the thing that I find unique about this is because this is important to what we are going through, have been through, and where we are about to go. I'm not talking about the age of the Aquarius. The age of Aquarius is 600 years from now. The people in the 60s did not have the astronomical data that the International Astronomical Library does. And the amount of time it takes the sun to go through a particular zodiac sign is not the same for each zodiacal sign. There are different lengths to ages, and there are dead zones between them. We're entering a dead zone. Aquarius is 600 years from now. And that was worked on by a very unique English researcher by the name of Maria Thames, who had an extreme amount of astronomical background. And several books came out, and it's interesting to me that those books never ended up in the New Age section of a bookstore, where everybody likes to go to find good research material. I go into anthropology. I go into the physics and science section. I go into the history section. I don't like walking through a New Age section of a bookstore unless I absolutely positively have to. As a researcher, I'm not big on the information that's given there because it's fed into all kinds of non-idealistic balloons. And it boils down to what I call perceptual engineering. And we are gullible. It's easier for me to listen to somebody at a water bubbler while I'm at work rather than to take anything more serious and investigate it for myself. And this is the way a lot of people think. It's a lot of work. I've been doing this for 9 years. Adrian Gilbert. We started getting more interesting. Then we had Carl Kellerman. Every single one of these guys were looking at certain edifices in the Mayan world from the ground. What makes you think an astronomical civilization looks at anything from the ground? They don't look at things laterally, straight across. So when you go down to the temple of Kukulkan in the springtime and you watch for that spring solstice and you watch for the snake to disappear into the stairways, when does that happen? That doesn't happen at dawn or dusk. It happens at high noon. High noon is the beginning of evening. Midnight is the beginning of day. There is a half portion of night and a half portion of day, and then there's day into night. And this is the feature that starts appearing in some of the cosmology, because we are a night, day, night, day, night, day events to energy. We happen to be leaving a very large cyclic period, which is night. We just got done with almost a little more than 5,000 years worth of night inside that cycle. We had a night cycle with a night interior. Look at the last 5,000 years of history and the number of prophets who had to come out of that. And most of them aren't even being listened to. So today, last night, is something that brought the entire world back to a page where it belongs. And maybe now we can get serious. We go through a timeline. And a lot of this I have on disk. The disc are $10. I'm going to run through a lot of this real quickly. So there are places I'm going to skip. I definitely advise that you want this material because, as far as I'm concerned, this needs to be shared so that we have an understanding. I'm not saying that I am the absolute messenger. I am saying, think about this. And I've told a lot of people at my lectures, I don't want to tell you what it is I think. I'm going to give you information, and I want you to think for yourself. Today, I'm going to tell you what I haven't said in 9 years. We go through all these periods of time, as scant as they may be. But right around 1500 BC, we started to have a lot of things occur historically. One of the big things is the dawn of industrial revolution. But even back then, one of the primary dates that the Mayan cosmology holds is August 13th, 14th, 3114 BC. That is a date that goes back to right at the top there. Orion rises, and it occurred on an evening that is referred to in the Maya as the Black Transformer. And I'm going to show you what the Black Transformer looks like in just a few moments here when we get there. But remember that phrase. There's a world gate there, and you will notice how in various places of the world, all of a sudden religions became very big. Up until that time beforehand, we had a lot of pagan things going on. Nibron, Nebuchadnezzar, and a variety of these king-lord states, because we started coming out of the caves. So there are certain signature points in our time period that are critical to where conscious all of a sudden did this. There's a heartbeat in consciousness, just like there is within us. If we are entities of consciousness, does not consciousness also share its embodiment with us? Not just locally, between all of us in this room, or outside of this room, but also with the underworld and the upper world. And that is a Mayan concern. Here's the beast. When the Yucatan first rose into its greater portion of civilization, and it was an inherited civilization, we can go all the way back from the Aztec to the Toltec to the Olmec. And when we get back to the Olmec, there's something that's very unique that happens. Edgar Cayce presented some things. He insisted on using the word Maya because the people who he was speaking to at the time and during this particular reading, that was a word they could understand. The Olmec were more, I don't know, kind of like not really there in their minds, because there's very little known specifically about the Olmec. The Mayan world we can talk about a lot, and the Mayan world is a reflection of about 4 or 5 other civilizations that existed before it. And every single one of them was a warring civilization. And most of them used the transits of Venus and the activity of Venus in its retrograde movement to conduct those wars. Venus is a monster. Venus is also the seat, the sacred seat of those energies. So when we talk about Venus going retrograde and everybody wants to go, oh, I'm not leaving home, that fear shouldn't exist. It just doesn't feed you. Now, Edgar Cayce basically talked about a man by the name of Iltar and a group of 10 others that went down into this area, and where were they from? Atlantis. That's a big problem for certain people. They don't like thinking about Atlantis. Plato was a nutcase. The Timaeus and the Critaeus were more political echoes than they were of a physical civilization. And he used them as arguments against the Senate at the time. I find it interesting in Edgar Cayce because I've done a lot of work with the Edgar Cayce Foundation, and I have pretty good research into his work to understand what it is he's talking about. Because when he mentions Atlantis is rising, we're talking about the consciousness, not necessarily the landmass. We're not talking about all the temples and the pyramids coming back up out of the water. We're talking about a consciousness. Because he made a very distinct statement in the late 30s. He was basically saying, souls that are entering are of Atlantean origin. That there is an entire gate, like a subway train, that brings us in. We've done this before. Which didn't surprise me because I walked around for the longest time. Being Native American, I started having a series of visions when I was 14 years old because the family I grew up in, I had a dad that worked in NASA. Everyone in my family is blonde and blue-eyed. They're all German, French, English. My dad worked for NASA and my mom come from a very stringent Southern Baptist background. So this was fun. I had science and religion all over the place. None of it went click. At the age of 14, I started having a series of visions that I thought were driving me mad because I really didn't understand what was going on until I got a little bit of direction. So I think everybody here has a pretty good idea when we dream or when we're thinking about something, what our consciousness is doing. It's opening. The Popol Vuh is a collection of mythological narratives of the post-classic kingdom of the Western Guatemala Highlands. It is their book of counsel. And some of these mythologies are planetary adjustments. One of the major ones that I found is Zapakna and the story of 400 boys, and we're going to get into that a little bit. Because the problem that I first noticed when I got into this was there's something amiss. The calendar doesn't match certain other alignments, as we're told. There seems to be a regressive amount of time, as if though what we are experiencing in the now, something happened before and we didn't recognize it. Because up until the late 1300s, before most of these temples and some of these priests were killed off, and definitely by the 16th century, after the conquering Spaniards, the priests who kept these books didn't exist anymore. Which means the calendar stopped. And all of its calendrics with it. And all the adjustments that would have been made for it in their books stopped. So it's confusing for them to go down into this region and we find certain stelae that have dates that go 5,000 years from now. And this is the thing that I found that was interesting. Why is everybody thinking it's going to end? The calendar as it is, right up into the 13th Baktun that we just escaped, actually depicts 14.6 billion years of time, which is roughly, as far as our scientists are concerned, the same age as the universe, particularly our region of it. So we're rather recent. We're recent enough. This is from National Geographic. I love this when I found this in the map stores I went to in Phoenix. Orion is dead center of our sky. When it is midnight and Orion is above you, you are looking at half day, half night. But both of those cycles of time within the 24-hour period that we call Earth time has a night and a day in it. And then it has a day and a night in it. And like I said, when we are in a cycle that is a night cycle, that is experiencing a night day, I want you to just kind of imagine what kind of chaos ensues. So the last 5,250 years, think about the history, the conquering, the rise of Christianity, the rise of Muhammad, all these other religions that came out. And instead of finding continuity for who and what we are, we displaced ourselves and put more separation due to religion than any other effect than a bomb could commit to. Bombs don't do that kind of devastation, they're physical. But when you have mental devastation and conscious devastation, you got a problem. Where am I going here? The Shoam are the books that were written by this priesthood. And for what we have of them historically, they're difficult to find and printed, so I had to do a lot of research online about them. However, the language is particularly terse. The book portrays hieroglyphic script and thus seems to depict the pre-conquest era. That is kind of important because it's one of the only remnants that we have in a museum that we can say occurred before planting flags for Spain. There's the beast. There are 8, if not more, cycles in this calendar. Individual calendars. Each one of those individual calendars runs down to the hour, to the day, to the week, to the month, to the year of casual conscious effects that evolve into what they considered their night-day processes. This speaks of the 4 civilizations or time periods, eras of time that existed to us. We're talking about entering the 5th world that a lot of natives speak about. This is the 5th world of a particular era. So if you can take the last 5,125 years and you can break it up into 4 quarters and then go into the one that we are just now entering at the 14th Waktun, each one of these eras goes goes day, night. We just got out of a night cycle that had a night day within it. This is an incredible amount of odd consciousness. You think it's bad when Venus or something else goes retrograde? What do you do when the entire universe or the area of space that you are in has a tendency to kind of go retrograde, the whole thing? And we're going to get into how it is we exist in our solar system, where we are in our solar system, how long it's taken us to transpire around a certain corner of it, and what that meant to us historically. The Mayans were really good at watching this. So the Aztec Mayan calendar boiled down to a series of about 30 different scientists that all had different ideas. Goodman, Martinez, Thompson were the 3 men who were chosen. Basically, this is what they call the GMT dating. It's used for calendrics within the Gregorian calendar. It's also used with some of the Julian calendar dating. But when it came to the idea of trying to transfer certain information off of the Aztec Maya calendar, it became very convoluted. So the date, 12/21/12, do you know why they picked that date? They like the numbers 1 and 2. That's it. Because we get a little bit too heavy into what numerology is. So when everybody was talking about, oh, it's 12, 12, 12. I'm feeling very Olympic. But this is good. This is good because what it is it's presenting a level of positive information, positive influence. You can play with numbers all you want. And I'm no expert mathematician. I still use a calculator. Slide rules bother me. But calculators that I can work with, numbers are fun. I would give great warning to a spiritual community that employs them a little too often. We can give significance to anything we want, but the truth is the truth. And that's a hard pill to swallow. This is an example of the planetary family. The sun has a relationship, one of its latent relationships is given to Zapakna and the 400 boys. Mercury is a Baktun marker, has great ties into some of the pyramids at Chichen Itza. Venus is the spirit companion of Yaxpas, or Tlaloc, the god of war. Venus is a handful to deal with. So when they look at the Venus transits, when they look at the activity of how Venus worked, and the adjustments that they made, both for Mercury and Venus, primarily because these were internal planets to a system. If I have a system of calendrics, I have a small wheel to a wheel slightly bigger to another one ever so slightly bigger, all the way across from the right side to the left. This is the Mayan calendar. It counts off in 20s, except for the second place, which counts only up to an 18. We are now looking at 20 spaces out, or excuse me, 13 rows out that count up to 20, except the second one counts up to 18. And so when we're going out of the 13th Baktun, we have seen this. That is supposedly what yesterday looked like. It came from this. The odometer in your car does the exact same thing in the way that it rolls over as you're doing mileage, and you're going to read it from right to left. Days, months, years, and then it starts going into some pretty expansive time periods. By the time we get to what's called a Kabbalah tune, let alone a Pick tune, we are talking thousands of years. So by the time the calendar rolls out to like this, we just calculated thousands of years of time. The calendar does 13s all the way out. So this is pretty huge, because I began to realize we're not talking about one cycle. We're talking about a multitude of cycles that aren't collapsing, they're converging. Because to a specific point in time, these wheels have converged. If you take a good look at the Aztec calendar, there were two wheels on the outside of it, there were two other wheels on the inside of it, because there's two calendars in the face of that stone object. This is an incredible convergence, not a collapse. Because what it wants to do after that anybody have an idea what that similar object looks like? Huh?
Magnetic field.
It's a magnetic field, isn't it? Impressive duality, impressive energy. Anyone who has any kind of physics background who would understand what the Planck distance is, or what the Planck minimum is? That basically states that out of a single centimeter cubed of space, dead vacuum space, is enough energy to create all the matter, all the stars, all the stellar material that exists in our universe out of 1 centimeter cubed. Now, if we can get free energy, you know how much energy that is? Out of a pinhead?
If you allow me to give an example. In examples using antimatter, 2 paper clips colliding, I think equals 43 1 megaton nuclear bombs going off if they were to annihilate each other. The Earth, if you were to take the entire mass of the Earth, shrink it down to the size of a pea, that's about around where it would become a black hole according to a typical scientist. I don't believe in black holes the typical way, but that kind of energy, if you were to convert that kind of mass into pure energy, is I forgot the perfect example, but I don't know how to exactly explain this. But if you were to blow that kind of energy up, it's There's a figure to an exact, there's an exact formula out there, I don't know what it's called, related to the Planck constant you're talking about. So look it up, but I forgot exactly how to link those two, but they're linked. It's out there to that cubic centimeter versus that pea size, and it's related. Okay, so it's such a tremendous amount of energy, it's just unbelievable. And just, they can go look that up.
Can you imagine the kiloton amount of energy that was released when Mount St. Helens went up? It blew that mountain, the side of that mountain, completely off. So take that, multiply it by about 100,000 times, and you couldn't even begin to reach the amount of energy found in a single cubic centimeter of vacuumed space. That vacuum of space is conscious, knows when we are looking at it, knows how to react to us when we're looking at it. And a lot of people talk about physics and they go, well, according to physics, everything is an illusion. And that's when I like to pick up a baseball bat. If I hit you in the head, tell me it's an illusion. But that's another story. So anyway, I want you to pay some attention here to the sun, the inner planets, and the outer planets all the way to Jupiter. Because by the time we reached Saturn, it was very difficult to watch the monitors of Saturn. Neptune and Uranus and Pluto, which is questionable, or whatever, didn't exist. Not to the human eye. Not to these guys in the absolute dark out in the middle of the night. You know, because the priest couldn't even sit there with a fire to keep him warm. Any kind of light detracted from what he was trying to watch. So no matter what time of year, I got somebody on the hills making notes for a few thousand years. And that idea came from stuff that was even thousands of years before that. But I want you to definitely make note of the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Moon, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Well, not so much Saturn. This is a list of some of the gods that have been found. The triad gods, Sun, Mercury, Venus, are actually in these locations at various sites, particularly at Palenque. Some of the dating on these stelae, the way that they go back in time, let alone some of them that go forward in time, like I said, there are some that have been found up until 5,000 years from now. And nobody really wanted to talk about this too much until the very last few days here, because everybody was like, oh, we're going to die. Or we can't let them know it's going to be okay. That's a bad marketing idea. So, one of the events that's kind of interesting here involves Hunahanapu and the hero twins, Zablanki being one of the major ones. And they have, Dennis Tedlock is an extreme researcher, by the way. And when I got caught up with some of his work and stuff, he talks about Venus, the morning star, and when he dies in Xibalba as the evening star. That got me to thinking, these planets are these characters. And these stories involve those characters. There's a mythology in here. There's a mythology in the Bible. There's a mythology in practically every sacred text ever written. If you can find the codex to break it, you'd be surprised at the information you can find. And I found this interesting because being Native American and people asking me about what I felt about this, I was kind of like, you know what? I'll look at it from a Native perspective. Totally different than the white world. And that's okay. Palenque triad, this is the birth of souls. Can we turn the lights down some? Might see some of this better. Go again? Oh, that's the ceiling, okay. Can somebody please go upstairs and put their body across that? Soul sacrifice. It was good for the Mayans. These are all captures that I made with Stellarium, which is a fantastic astronomical program, better than the one that came with my telescope. So when I started putting some of the numbers into this thing, I got excited. This is the Planetary triad, the birth of souls, or Shula. Shula has a lot to do with its. And its is the common spirit that comes from the tears, blood, the sap of trees, anything that the Mayan or these natives considered sacred. This is a dew of the consciousness. So when it talked about the birth of souls, I'm like, it's not quite right because, let's see, we're older than that as entities. What does this mean? This meant that it was kind of somewhat the birth of an ideal. And we're going to touch on some of that. So this involved the Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Jupiter, almost the entire family of the gods, born unto the first mother, who is the new moon, in this date. And I don't know if you can make it out there. But it's 2360 BC. This is written out in their books. The fourfold sighting, fourfold cornering, measuring, fourfold staking, having the cord, stretching the cord in the sky, on the earth, the four sides, the four corners, as they're said by the maker, modeler, mother, father of life, etc., 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 is a creation theme that has everything to do with something falling into place. See, because what we are doing, and I'll show you this in a moment when we get to it, is we are rising at about 60 degrees like a bullet or like a dolphin coming out of the water. We are rising through the galactic plane. We are leaving a density of stars, and we're going into outer space. It's bad enough to be in the galactic plane because there's a lot of activity and you get hit with asteroids. And we've seen what that does, particularly Bruce Willis. But we've also noted that when we come out into open area, and this isn't going to happen in about 2 million years. We're going to be so high above the galactic plane that when we look up in the sky at night, a good portion of the sky is going to be dark. And when you look at the other side of the sky, you're going to see the top of the Milky Way. I'm coming back for that. For his father. This is just a plate that was found. It just shows him coming out of a turtle carapace, or the shell. This is an event that happens repeatedly. It didn't just happen once. This creation theme goes over and over and over in a variety of these different cycles when they reach this level. Birth of Zumanku, first father. And the adjustment that I made to it. Notice the difference here. Jupiter is high, not behind the sun. Jupiter is dead on behind the sun here, only a matter of days after. So we're beginning to see, I began to see some of the effect that there was a regression here. The calendar sometimes seemed to escape forward, sometimes seems to escape backwards. It was more regressive than anything else because the stories that are in the Popol Vuh are planetary adjustments given out as mythologies. First mother, the adjustment that I made for the Kalanka sonnet. Oh, we can go through this. Scorpio, the field that was within Scorpio. We're talking about two areas of space. There's an underworld and an upper world. The upper world lies at Scorpio, Sagittarius, and Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus was the 13th constellation used in the Maya. And there's a reason why Ophiuchus is above the galactic ecliptic, or our solar ecliptic. Not the galactic plate, but our solar system plate, ecliptic. Examna is a sky artist that has a lot to do with how the sky came together. And it's rather recent that Orion entered the part of the sky as it did. The Egyptians wrote about this in a thing called Tepzepe. And Graham Hancock and Robert Bauval, Robert Schoch, and a variety of other researchers did a vast look at this and found out that the Sphinx and the pyramids obviously have to be thousands of years older than what Zawi Hawass wants to say. It's interesting to me, when we went into Egypt, he fled. Gee, I wonder why. This white road, it contains the cosmic monster. This is the serpent that comes through the sky. And where the galactic center lies in the Lagoon Nebula is actually the mouth of the serpent biting into itself. But this is not the tail of the serpent. See, the tail of the serpent swings 180 degrees back across the sky and ends at the Pleiades. So it basically does this arc and then segments itself along our ecliptic, the path that our planets follow and that we follow. This to me was kind of interesting because the white road is in the air, the red road is in the heart. Thus, red for the blood, white for the sky, because when it's really dark out, and I love it when I take a trip to Phoenix because I have a T-roof on my car. I like to take that off and drive out to Phoenix in the middle of the night because every once in a while I'll dare take a look at the sky while I'm driving, unless I stop and I actually have a ritual for myself right in the wash. I don't care. I can sage it any day, any time. So anyway, we'll notice that Gemini, Taurus, and Scorpio, Sagittarius are critical points in the sky to them because they are 180 degrees of each other. Scorpio, Sagittarius, Ophiuchus goes up. On the other side, we have Gemini, Taurus, and Orion that points down. And it does this, counterclockwise. We are spinning in our solar system, counterclockwise. We are traveling through a Milky Way, counterclockwise. These patterns begin to take on meaning. Castor and Pollux I won't get into, but it's the Taurus, Gemini, Scorpio, Sagittarius regions of the sky we want to pay attention to. Get it, the upper world, Sagittarius, Scorpio. This appears in the bow of the archer of Sagittarius. That is where the galactic center is, in the Lagoon Nebula at Sagittarius 9. There's the puppy right there. Underworld is Orion. Anybody here see the movie Apocalypto or anything like that? Apocalypto was a great movie. I thought it was fantastic. The other movie that I really liked was called The Fountain. So if you remember those names, write them down. The Fountain, which was Hugh Jackman, and then we had Apocalypto, which was Mel Gibson's work, but had a variety of real Mayans involved in it. And there's a story that is told in Apocalypto by one of the elders. Pay strict attention to that story as he tells it, because it has a lot to do with how man took things from nature and was completely unsated by that and wanted more and more and more, because it's part of our nature to take. Orion coming into position at midpoint of the sky is very recent. As a matter of fact, recent enough to say it's about 45,000 years ago. So the planting of the three-stone place by the Maya, if you go into some of their homes, they actually have a triangle on the floor. And in the center of it is their fire. This is good for 360 days out of the year. The last 5 days, called the Wuyeb, are days of darkness, and everybody puts their fire out, locks their doors, closes their windows, and nobody associates with anybody for 5 days. That completes the cycle of 1 year, 365 days. Why do they do this? Night is in night, and nobody wants to leave their home. This is a cycle of consciousness that exudes throughout the day, the week, the year, the month, over vast periods of time, and that window for what is day or night widens as it happens. Pleiades. The Pleiades are the house of the 400 boys, and we'll get into that in a second. There's the Pleiades. And we want to pay attention necessary to Alcyone, because there's a lot of people who talk about the so-called Pleiadian photon belt. Now, I don't want to crush anybody's dreams here, okay, but I got news for you. The entire system of the Pleiades is moving away from us. We are moving away from it, I should say. We are moving towards Hercules at an untold amount of speed that you can't even feel while you're sitting in your chair. Because gravity is not only a good idea, it's the law. So the Mayan creation theme, the more I got into it and I discovered a little bit about the hero twins, I'm saying, okay, the story that exudes here, this is kind of interesting, because what I want to do is I want to find the point where this goes click and it repeats. Because if I can find the time frame that's in that, I should be able to crack some of this. They can look at the calendar all they want. I'm a native. I'm going to look at the sky. Because for whatever calendrics are missing out of the Popol Vuh, the stories that didn't get told, the stories that didn't get completed, the alignments and such that did not get registered in their history, that has been missing for several hundred years, has never escaped the sky. The sky continued to do what it was doing. So I don't care how, the GMT dating and everything like that is very interesting, but not very accurate. So regardless of all the numbers, I said, what were the planets doing? The lying down tree is rather unique. Oh, and it looks like something freaked out my text. Oh no, it's all there. Okay. So this date of August 13th, 3114 BC is the beginning of a particular period. This cycle that we just came out of, this is when it turned from the 12th to the 13th Baktun. But there's also another cycle that contains 13 of 13 Baktun cycles. So I'm going to show you something here that was unique that I found that involves these 26, 13 long Baktun cycles. Because the cycle that's closing right here is huge. We're not talking just one cycle. It's not just one Baktun that's closing. An entire Kabbalatun is closing. And that is a major, major time period to have elapsed in human history. This is the black transformer. Why is it called the black transformer? Because the entire embodiment of most of the white road, you will notice, is in the underworld. This is Stellarium. So I want you to kind of imagine when we're looking at this, because I eliminated the horizon and the land markers and stuff here. So when we're looking at pictures that I have here, try to imagine that they're in some pictures, and I'll let you know when. This is facing our south horizon. So you have to picture that you are not just on the Earth, you are the Earth, examining these things. Because the Earth that's not really in this picture is like here, and we're looking at the midnight sky and high noon at the same time, the way that I can use this program. Or anybody can use the program. So this date is unique because it's talking about the lying down tree. What is the lying down tree? The entire white road is in the underworld. It's lying down, as opposed to what's called the upright tree. A little more on that. Like I said, I have these discs. They're available. I would love to think that some people can take this and have a better study of it. Share it with your friends, is my advice. August 13, pre-dawn, southern horizon, upright crocodile tree. Now we're going to watch some of this unfold, because this happens in one night. between August 13th to August 14th dawn, from midnight to noon. It begins to shift following the dawn. This is a dance that's going on in the sky above our heads. The entire paddler canoe, jaguar paddler canoe, or the canoe that contains, as far as they are concerned, 3 of their major gods, Itzamna being the primary one. Then there is the jaguar lord and the paddler lord. So there's one rowing, and there's 2 passengers in front of him. They happen to be involved in some of the stellar mass here that you will notice with some of the stars that follow through here on the Milky Way, as in one evening the Milky Way transpires the entire sky from the underworld through the upper world back into the underworld. It rises and dies in less than 24 hours. So here's the crocodile tree with the paddler canoe. We have the stingray paddler, jaguar paddler, and the maize god, Itzamna, that are all involved in this boat. And this is that what they're doing is they're basically drawing the sky. That's how it's turned. It flattens out. This is the full view of the paddler, of the canoe. If you were looking north, we would see Polaris, our pole star, which has, or it basically is called the seat of Itzamna, who happened to be one of the first primary false gods. He had to be kicked out of his perch. And the hero twins, because it's dealing with this latent 13 Baktun, the hero twins that rose out of these stories were capable of dealing with these gods or these lords of the underworld and assassinating them one by one. Why? Because we are reducing tension, we are reducing chaos to seek order. Back to the full skyline, the paddler comes clear across the southern horizon. It begins to sink now into the west. All the way into the west. This is first family rising after that event. In other words, they are reborn. Because to enter the underworld means basically your life in dealing with the underlords. They're very powerful. So to conquer them took a lot of ingenuity, and the stories have exactly how the hero twins dealt with them individually, Zapakna being one of the most recent. And I won't go into that, but you can, like I said, examine some of this for yourself, and a lot of the information is on these CDs. So by February 5th, 3112, which is 540 days after the original creation event, First Father rises again, 3 stone place. This is the second black transformer in less than 600 days. There it goes. This is a story unfolding in the sky about their gods. How their gods draw out the sky, put everything in a place, and just like the Mayans, they used to get really freaked out because these priests would tell them, we're going to have a solar eclipse, we're all going to die, unless we feed the gods. So how did they feed the gods? They used their own people, that's what they did, because all these provincial states, they said, you know what, Bob over here on hill number 7 doesn't have as big an army as we do. Let's go play with Bob. We'll take his people, we'll take his resources. Because you see, in the ball court games that the Maya played, if a king did not keep his province in order or within a level of success, that meant agriculturally, birth rate, a lot of things went into that. How their medical care was done by their priests. This was all a ruse. This is how the priest kept power, through fear and intimidation. Does that sound familiar? It doesn't surprise me in any way that their civilization had to fall. You know why? Because night and night eventually has to go to day, and I love this thing that I saw on Facebook not too long ago that said, "Will the women please take over the world? I'm tired." That was probably written by a man. Because day is feminine and it's excessive. You know what? There's no escape. Women are very powerful. That doesn't make us men weak, but it does mean we need stabilization. A good woman makes a good man. In the native tradition, you screw with the women, you're dead. They'll take you out to the nearest river and cut you up into thousands of pieces and turn you into fish bait without blinking an eye. You screw with the children, the women, you're dead. You screw with the tribal council, you're dead. We don't need prisons. You're dead. It was made proper in the raised up sky. And I think what they basically did was, because Orion had been in the center of the sky, they constantly gave birth back to it. Because as thousands of years go by, these stars are moving. Our constellations are changing. We're moving. You can't stop this. It is inevitable. Resistance is futile. The women are Borg. Scary. I mean, seriously scary. So here we have a good look at the world trees. Why did they have two? Yes? You got 5 minutes? Okay, well then I want to do this real quick. I'm going to skip through a lot of this, but note these real quick, because this is the northern and southern skies being faced into different quadrupedic gods. So I'm going to shoot forward here real fast. I will say this. Anybody seen this before? This is not a guy in a spacecraft going into outer space. This is the sarcophagus lid of Pakal. And on it are markers of the skyline for when he was buried. That's how it looks on the day that he was buried. It's easy to misinterpret this as a guy in a spaceship going into the sky, because that's what he did. Just like the pharaohs went into Orion and Osiris. This is a religion. The Venus cycle is very unique. And when I took a look at the Venus cycle, I noticed something between June 8th and June 6th, starting in 2004 to 2007. I found the center of it had to have been in December of 2007. Ooh. Let's take a look. This is the Venus transit as it occurs in 2007. It's behind the sun, because what's at the north and the south are in front of the sun. By the time Venus comes halfway around cycle and is sitting behind the sun, night in night. These cycles are folding over. That's the far side Venus crossing. This is the upright tree for that event. This is a little bit about the Venus cycles and how they occur, completely wrapping around before they ever come back to zero. This is a lot of time. This was on the Facebook a while ago. I found this and I decided I'm going to share. Because this is the galactic position of our planets for 12-21-12. Ask any astronomer, there's no alignment. Nowhere, anywhere. Doesn't happen. It's not there. Wrong date. Carry on. This is from Brian Mendez at UC Berkeley, the Worldwide Telescope. Go ahead, argue with him. So what are the differences? What is this time cycle? Where does it collapse? What does it come to? Like I said, natives don't look at things from the ground. We're looking from the air. This is a top-down view of the temple of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza. This is where everybody goes to watch the snake disappear on the stairs. It occurred to me not too long ago, because I got a little bit of a download information, and it told me, take a look at it from the top down, hello. And I'm like, ooh, why haven't I done that before? So this is rather recent information that I've put here, because it matches, the 8 steps match a portion of a cycle, and I won't get into that right at the moment, and the 9 spheres are the 9 heavens and the 9 underworlds. When we take a good look at this, 8 steps times 9 spheres equals to 72. It breaks down here. It's multiplied by the divine number of 1,000. We get 144,000 days equals a buktun. This building represents a buktun amount of time in stone. It's usable over and over and over and over. Very convenient. It happens to also be looking straight south at the Chul. And the Chul is one of their observatories that were there. The Charcoal. Well, this is some definition that I have in here dealing with the time periods. But I want us to note something about the alignments. 2007 to 244116 BC goes back even further to 5385-1 BC. 54,000 years. Because Jupiter is the old sun birthed by the new sun. That's a picture of the last great Kabbalah tune. We're not just talking Bach tunes here, I discovered. We're talking much fuller cycles. This is a definition of where we are, kind of. Parsec-wise, which is a distance of space, of where we're sitting in the solar system. This is the creation theme, December 21st, 2007. It's sunrise, 13 Baktun conjunction in the lying down sky of Sun, Jupiter, and Mercury that are converging. It then goes to December 21st, 2007 at noon. Same thing, 13 Baktun conjunction in the place of creation, and now First Mother is involved. Earth is here, 180 degrees on the other side of this event. So we got something that's happening at high noon here, and then we have something else that's happening at midnight on the other side. 180 degrees, it's passing through us. We're in the middle of this. It continues right up to the 22nd of 2007. I want you to think about this, because this has Jupiter directly behind the sun. This is an alignment. That's yesterday. This is the interplanetary scale. Notice the alignment? And then we go to the outer planets. Yeah. So what's going on here? Because the closure of all these cycles is very unique to us. And I want us to kind of remember something. Consciousness is growing. You're not going to escape this. This has to happen. It has to happen. Why? Because humanity has a lot of incorrect mannerisms to it. Philosophies, the things, the old world, this has to die. And we are part of it. So don't ask yourself anymore why you are here. I've had people come up to me and ask me directly, why are we here? One reason. When you learn to conquer the planet that you are living on, divinely, that is the only time you're going to be ready to go to other worlds. Everything else is resistance. There's some final notes in this, but I definitely would welcome you to consider some of these CDs. They go for $10. The information on there that we just skipped through is pretty vast, and something because I've taken 9 years and tried to compress it. It has references and links for that. Everything that I went through here, and the mythology of Zapakna is online. I'm not even going to try to put all that information on slides. So I thank you for listening, but I want you to consider one thing. If we cannot find a consciousness for ourselves first, you'll never find the consciousness of the person sitting next to you, or your children, or your boss, or anybody else that you relate to. When we hold hands, it's from the left to the right. Energy flowing in from the left, exuding on the right. If we could just get everybody to stand in line. It's not a question of following something. It's a question of unity. It's a question of coming together and putting yourself in a place where you can grow. What were the Mayan trying to say? We're done with that world. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. That was a wonderful presentation. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to go to our next speaker about 10 minutes. The next speaker is very special, DeMarie Mulatiare, and definitely you're going to want to hear what she has to say. So please, everybody, just relax for a few minutes and come back, and we'll be right back. There's some coffee and tea in the room and down the hall. Thank you.